Hi everyone, welcome back to Lockdown Literature with me, Mr. Davis, coming to you from the bunker. Today we're going to be talking a little bit more about poetry. In particular, we're going to be talking about sonnets. Sonnets came to fame in England and Britain in the 16th century by people like Wyatt, Henry Howard and William Wordsworth. But perhaps they were made most famous and popularised by the works of William Shakespeare, who wrote over 154 sonnets. So what is a sonnet? An English or Shakespearean sonnet follows this pattern or structure. It has 14 lines. The first 8 lines we call the octave. The last 6 lines we call the sestet. So it's one stanza, but it has 2 parts. The rhyme scheme is also very distinct as well. It follows a pattern of A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, and ends in a rhyming couplet of G, G to give a sense of finality. Each line as well is written in iambic pentameter. And what that means is that there are 10 syllables, but there are 10 syllables in each line. And they follow a pattern of short, long sounds. So they're grouped in pairs, and we call those 10 syllables in pairs 5 metric feet. So iambic pentameter is that rhythm which a Shakespearean sonnet is written in. Shakespearean sonnets, or English traditional sonnets, were most famously popularised for being romantic poems. And the reason why they were considered to be a deep expression of love was because they were so difficult to write. Because you had to communicate what you wanted to say and your meaning within this tight and very rigid structure. However, that is not the only form or only type of sonnet that's out there. In fact, sonnets are an Italian creation, and they were first used in the 13th century by people like Dante and Michelangelo, part of the Renaissance movement. We call that Italian sonnet or Petrarchian sonnet. Rather, it follows a different structure. It's called Petrarchian, but Petrarch never created them himself. They were like named after his honour, if you like. Petrarch was one of the founding scholars of the Renaissance movement, and the Italians named the sonnet after him. And it was Wyatt, who I mentioned earlier, and Henry Howard and William Wordsworth, who wrote those Italian sonnets and brought them from Italy across to the UK in the 16th century. And that's when Shakespeare used them also and wrote his 154, like I mentioned, and popularised them. So the structure of an Italian sonnet lends itself more to the Italian language, but obviously they're written in English, the ones that we're considering, and they follow this pattern of A, B, B, A, B, B, A, C, D, E, C, D, E. So it still has the octave, it still has the sestet, but the rhyme scheme is different. Sometimes the sestet follows this pattern of C, D, D, C, E, E. So as you can appreciate, there's quite a number of rhyming couplets within the Italian sonnet, and that's the main distinction between the Italian and the traditional English sonnet. That too was used for love poetry, and interestingly, often the Italian sonnet would break the octave and the sestet, so there would be a gap between the two. Let's go now to look at a sonnet and consider whether it's a traditional English one or an Italian one. Sonnet 130, a famous poem by William Shakespeare as part of the collection of the 154 sonnets that he wrote and was commissioned to write during his lifetime. So we can see, since it being a Shakespearean sonnet, we expect it to follow that same structure that I just talked to you about. Let's have a look and see if it does. So, the first thing that we want to notice is the rhyme scheme. And there we go, it follows the same pattern that we've just thought about. The octave follows that alternating sounds into the sestet and finishing on a rhyming couplet to give that sense of finality. The 8 lines or the eighth line rather, ends in a full stop. It's an end stop, creating a definite pause. Because the octave in a sonnet is about introduction of one idea, and the sestet is an expansion or development of that idea. A little bit like how we looked at the prologue to Romeo and Juliet. That was a sonnet, and we thought about how the octave gave us the introduction of the story about what's going to happen to the star-crossed lovers, and then the sestet is when the chorus was talking to the audience and asking for their patience and engagement with the performance that was just about to happen. Here, we have a similar thing. In the first 8 lines, Shakespeare talks about, strangely, how the woman of his has captured his admiration is not perfect. He uses a range of imagery to talk about how plain and almost repulsive or ugly she might be in terms of like conventional beauty. And then the sestet is where he uses the octave and the ideas in the octave to really push the message of how much he loves her, that she doesn't deserve any false comparison. She's not a goddess, she's not an angel, she's not beautiful as a rose, but he loves her just as much. And this makes Sonnet 130 very interesting, because sonnets were usually contained a lot of hyperbole. And what hyperbole is deliberate exaggeration. So sonnets of the 16th century usually contain that deliberate exaggeration to overstate and flatter and convey that sense of admiration that the writer has for the object of their desire, to compliment. But Shakespeare went against that in this poem and used a reverse method. He was made a mockery of that hyperbole and tried to make a statement of love without false compare. So he was a little bit cunning there, a little bit sneaky. He tried to woo the girl. Instead of telling her that she was beautiful, comparing her to summer's day, instead he tells her that she's not a goddess, she walks firmly on the ground. If hair is wires, then black wires grow on her head. But he's not doing that to be mean or nasty. He's doing that to flatter her in a new way, moving away from and making a mockery of the insincerity of hyperbole and trying to tell her that you are the love of my life. Nothing can compare to you. So that makes Sonnet 130 quite different from the other sonnets in his collection. Before we move on to our next example, let's just think about that iambic pentameter and how that's working here in this sonnet. So we said that iambic pentameter was a pattern of paired syllables, short, long sounding. So that creates 5 feet, so there's 10 syllables per line. Let's see if that works. My mistress's eyes are nothing like the sun. 10 syllables, short, long sound, 5 pairs, 10 in a line, 5 metric feet. So we can see again that this sonnet fulfills the structure that we just talked about at the start of this video. But it's important to remember that the sonnet is not just limited to the traditional form and structure or the Italian or Petrarchan form and structure. There are many modern interpretations and uses of the sonnet form, and they will be explored in some other videos that we will record for you. In particular, you can go from here and look at the Wilfred Owen Anthem for Doomed Youth video, where we explore how Wilfred Owen has used the sonnet form in an ironical way to show the futility of war and emphasize the horror and devastation of it. See you there.